gorilla stomping in a zoo. Check the vocals, animals gather right.
Hey everybody, and welcome back for another video. On today's video, I'm doing something I hadn't really planned on doing just yet. But what I'm going to be doing is replacing my hot water tank, hot water boiler, hot water heater, whatever you want to call it. This baby needs to be replaced. So, you may be wondering, how do you know it needs to be replaced? Well, there's multiple factors involved, and leading up to this point in time, I hadn't really known myself that it was due to be changed. I knew age-wise that I was getting close, but I always kind of wondered, am I just going to come home to a flood in my basement? Is there going to be some other warning signs like flakes of corrosion in my water? What's going to be that telltale sign that my tank needs to be replaced? So in this video, I'm going to explain to you why I've reached the decision to replace the tank at this point in time, and give you some tips and tricks on identifying if your tank also needs to be replaced. We'll get into some details on the technical aspects of things, and we'll get to the actual replacement of the tank itself. So let's get started with this video, and let's get into the nitty-gritty. Alright, so here we are with my old tank, current tank, and this is the original tank that we put in this house when it was built. And our house was built in 2013, and on the label down below here, it actually has a manufacturing date of 2013-08-08. So August 8th, this tank was manufactured, and it was installed in that year. So based on that alone, I'm in upwards, going on 9 years with this tank installed. A typical hot water tank will probably last you between 8 to 12 years, is some of the information out there. And when you get into that time frame, it's time to start thinking about replacing your hot water tank. And especially, as far as lifetime goes, if you're not one to be doing routine maintenance, draining it down every year, replacing your anode rod, you're definitely going to be in the lower range of that lifespan. So, myself, I have not been keeping up on the maintenance with this tank. I've never changed the anode rod, I've never drained it down, and we're on an artesian well which can produce or deposit sediments inside the tank. We also have hard water. So overall, all these factors together have given me a shorter lifespan probably than what this tank could have put out under different circumstances. So you may be wondering, okay, well, what was the final straw that led you to believe that you needed to replace this tank? Well, on top of a hot water tank, right here is called a Tpr valve. And the Tpr stands for temperature and pressure relief valve. Basically, if your tank reaches a temperature above 210 degrees Fahrenheit, or reaches a pressure inside over 150 psi, this valve, which is spring-loaded, will release, and it will vent out through this drain pipe, which relieves the excess pressure inside the tank, and make a mess on your floor or in your drain pan, whatever the case may be. So, recently, we've had some significant snow melt and rainfall, and I've come down here in the utility room and there was a lot of water on the floor, and I attributed it to coming in through our well line, in through the ground, and just being, a higher ground level of water coming in through the holes in the foundation and making a mess on the floor. Anyways, we recently had another storm of rain and snow melt. So I actually came down here to check again to see if there was water on my floor. And indeed there was, but this time I noticed there was water on the side of the tank just below this spout right here. Now typically this had a longer drain that goes about 6 inches from ground level, and that would prevent the water from spraying all over the room and being contained to your drip tray or whatnot. I've taken it off since while I was doing all my little bit of investigating here. But anyways, this was a different set of circumstances than I had seen before, because before I arrived after the fact while that water had probably dried up already. So my Tpr valve had released, and it released again prior to me coming down at the second storm. So finally I was able to find out that my Tpr valve was releasing. Now typically if your Tpr valve releases, you should really err on the side of caution and say, why did it release? Alright, these typically do not release under normal circumstances. And they say once it has released once, you should really evaluate if your tank is due for replacement. Because you can replace these valves, but the question is, do you really want to? You know, what set of circumstances happened inside your hot water tank to cause that valve to need to open? So, being an 8 to 9 year old tank, I've decided that replacing this valve is not sufficient. Alright, what I need to do is replace the whole tank. And what I'm going to do, currently I have all the valves off to the tank, and so there's no extra pressure going into this tank right now. I'm going to turn the valves back on, and I'm going to show you what my current Tpr valve is doing under resting circumstances right now. I'm not going to turn the breaker back on, I got it off right now. But I'm going to just show you what happens when the tank is put under pressure. So let's do that right now, and I'll show you exactly what was happening for me to get to this conclusion. Alright, so at this point in time, I'm going to open up the hot water lines to the house. And I'll open up the cold water supply line. So now at this point in time, here is my Tpr valve drain line. And once the tank pressure raises up, now this has got a little bit of an upward angle, so I'm just going to push down on it. Out comes water. Okay, so I'll give it a couple more seconds again. Push down. More water. Alright, so my Tpr valve has a constant leak. And that can be a result of sediment in the tank getting caught in the Tpr valve following discharge. It can be caused by a malfunctioning Tpr valve, or it can be caused by continued circumstances inside the tank which is causing the valve to release under some kind of pressure. Alright, so anyways, this valve will not stop draining, and as a result I have the option of replacing the valve or replace the whole tank. So given the tank's age, I'd rather start from scratch, get a brand new tank, and whatever condition happened inside this tank to cause this valve to function and release pressure, I want to eliminate that from my household altogether. So that's how I came to the conclusion that it is time to replace my tank. Alright, so to begin the process of getting this tank removed and out of here and the new tank in, first things you want to do is shut off the breaker to your tank. Whatever condition is going on inside your tank to cause that Tpr valve to release or discharge, first of all, shut the power off. Alright, you want to eliminate any kind of heating going on inside, because you got temperature and pressure are the two things that are going to make that valve release. So you eliminate the temperature by eliminating the electricity to the elements. You eliminate the pressure by also eliminating the electricity, which causes the water to be heated and expand, which creates pressure. So what I have here is a voltage tester. This is kind of a yes-no, is there voltage going to your tank? For the purpose of this part of the video, I have restored power to my tank. I will follow my power line coming out of the side of the tank back towards the wall, where I get access to a bare or semi-bare wire where I can test for voltage. So I'm following my BA cable back to the junction box, and then behind the vapor barrier I can see my red 240 wire, and I get a red warning that there is power going to the tank. Again, there's my warning that the line is live. So I'm going to proceed over to the breaker box, turn off the breaker. Now I'll come back again, test the same spot. And that's a negative. These testers can give you tiny little blips that look like a positive, but they are just from movement, jostling, coming near a bit of metal. But when it's next to the wire, it would be a constant red if that is live. Alright, so at this point in time, I'm satisfied that the power has been cut to the tank, the breaker is off, and I know that it has eliminated power to the tank. There's no voltage in the line going to the tank. So we have that much done. Power is off. So the next step in removing the tank is to shut off any water going into or out of the tank. So in my case, I have a hot water supply going to the house. So I'm going to turn that off as well. And this is not always present. You have a cold water supply going into the tank. Some people will say that a valve is not required on the cold water side, and you should have another valve somewhere in order to shut off your main water line, which is carrying into the tank. But luckily enough, in my case, I do have a valve for my cold water supply, and I'm going to turn that off as well. So as of right now, we have both of these off. There should be no hot water able to go up to the faucets. And the faucets, the water in those lines, should not be able to backtrack down through and empty out once we open this line up. Okay, same thing with the cold. There should be no cold water able to come, get past this ball valve, and go spraying around when we release this line. Alright, so that's the water lines isolated. So far, so good. So the next step that I'm going to do is the Tpr valve itself. The Tpr valve has a little metal swing arm, and if you pull that up, it opens up the valve and allows any water pressure to escape out this drain. And basically I'm going to depressurize this tank and also vent the tank by opening up this Tpr valve. So I have here just a little jug. Put that under the drain, and I'm going to begin by lifting the metal arm. And I just took the last bit of pressure off of the tank. I'm going to leave that in the open position, and that is finished draining. I'll just push down to get the last little bit of, like so. Alright, so as of right now, we have an open Tpr valve because I've manually opened the testing lever. We have the pipes to the house isolated, and we have the power off to the tank. Alright, so our next step now is going to be to drain the reservoir of water in our tank. Because as of right now, this is holding approximately 40 gallons of hot to semi-warm water, depending on when you turn the power off to your tank. We're not going to go lugging around a tank that has 40 gallons of water in it if we can avoid it. Okay? There may be some sediment somewhere in this tank. We don't know the exact conditions inside of this tank. So we're going to start draining it out. Hopefully we'll get all the water out, depending on what's going on inside the tank. But what I have here is just a washer hose. Alright, this is just a cold line that you'd use to hook up a washer. It has two female ends, and I'm just going to connect one of those ends to this drainage spout at the base of the hot water tank. Now, depending on your circumstances, if you have a floor drain or some kind of reservoir, a sump pump pit, somewhere where you can run the other end of this hose. As for me, I have a sump pump pit, which I'll be running the hose into. You need something lower than the tank itself so that the water will drain down and out the line into that reservoir. So I'm going to move this over to my sump pump tank. At which point in time I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver and open up this drainage valve, and hopefully there isn't any sediment or anything blocking the valve, and will drain down. Alright, air will enter in through the Tpr valve up top, since it's a vent right now, and the water will come out the bottom and go down the sump pump vent, or the sump pump pit. Alright, and our sump pump pit has a French drain connected to it, so it should just drain on out into the ditch outside. But again, you're going to have to find some way of doing this yourself. You may need to use some kind of an electric pump to pump the water up and out through a basement window. Some kind of situation that meets your needs to get this water to come out and get rid of it. Okay, so at this point in time I'm going to put this in the pit, and I'll come back and I'll open up this valve and we'll see what happens. So at this point in time I am ready to open up the valve. And I'll turn this and we'll see what we get. Alright, so at this point in time the valve is fully open, and as you see we have water draining out, which is a great sign. There's no sediment blocking the drain, and we're just going to let this water all drain out until the tank is empty. Depending on the speed of the draining, this could take, minutes to tens of minutes. I'll find out, and when I come back, I'll let you know how long it took. Also, in the interest of saving time, while the tank drains down through the sump pit there, I'm going to go ahead and start disassembling the electrical panel for the tank, and we can get ahead by that extra little bit by getting this electrical disconnected. So I'm going to start off by using a Robinson bit in the case of my tank here right now, and remove 2 screws, actually 1 screw, like such. So as of right now you can see my wiring is exposed. Once again, I am going to get my voltage tester, and there's 2 settings on my voltage tester. Some are just 1 setting does all. There's a red setting, which is pretty much normal, and then a blue setting, which is extra sensitive. I'm going to start off by using the extra sensitive setting, testing each of these wires for any kind of voltage. I'll change it to the other setting as well, which is less sensitive, and again that's a little phantom reading. That's okay. There's no warning reading happening other than the little jostling around. It's kind of a magnetic response sometimes to being close to metal, but if there was voltage, it would be a constant red, which there is not. So this is safe. Alright, you gotta ignore the single little beeps. They do not indicate dangerous voltage active. It's when it's actively flashing red. So what I'm going to be trying to do is keep everything, organized here. But basically, we have 2 hots and a ground. Alright, there's no neutral with this. This is like a baseboard heater, wiring wise. So I'll bring you a little bit closer and we'll just get the morettes taken off, get the wires disconnected, and we'll get this electrical laid to the side. Alright, so we're in nice and close here now. So again, there's a red for the tank, which is a hot, which goes to the white in our feed supply, which is also hot. I'm going to remove the moret from there, or wire nut, whatever you want to call it. Uncoil that. That one is released. We have another hot, 2 blacks. We'll get the moret off of that. Uncoil that as well. And there we are, the 2 hots are disconnected. So we'll move on and get the ground disconnected. There's actually two grounds going into this one moret, as well as the ground from our supply. And what that is for two separate elements, two burners, okay, that are grounded into this one. And we'll get these separated, like so. So as of right now, the power, the 240 coming in through the side, has a white, black, and ground. So I'm going to be, what I have to do now, there appears to be a couple of screws holding this connector into the side of the tank. I'm going to remove those screws, at least one. And I'll lay that aside. And typically in the back there would be a spinnable kind of like a washer, but in this case, yes, I do see it. So that could be the tricky part, getting that washer off inside. And you may need to try and get a certain angle at it, kind of bump it with a hammer and a flathead screwdriver to get it to unspin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to a flathead, and I'm going to see if I can do exactly that. Kind of put this at the top of it, give it a bump to make the washer spin counterclockwise. And I just wanted to show you the technique that seems to be working for me. Is I've been kind of rocking this here while with my finger unthreading the washer inside. I gave it a few hits with the screwdriver to loosen it, and then the outside one became fairly loose. So now I'm just kind of keeping that, pushed aside. And I'll show you. This is the washer right here. Alright, so there's the washer that I just removed from the back of that plug. Now I'm going to carefully feed these wires in and pull this whole assembly out, because I don't want to damage the plastic coating on these wires. You don't want any metal to metal contact with your power lines. And there we are. That is removed. And one thing I will do just for safekeeping is I'll get the wires together, put the nut on, and thread that onto the assembly like that. And that'll just keep it all together. And as far as the tank goes, the new tank should have a bung like this that will accept this assembly again. But as for now, there is a little clamp on the side of the tank up top. I'll release that, and I will lay this power cord aside for when we're ready for the new tank. Alright, so I just wanted to update you so far, time-wise. So we've disconnected the electrical and everything while the tank has been draining. And so far on tank draining, we're up to 15 minutes and 15 seconds. So be prepared for the tank draining to take you a while. And so it's a good idea to get some more steps done while you wait. One other step that we can do while we wait for the tank to drain is to open up our new tank and get that ready as well. Alright, so the replacement hot water tank that I'm going to be using It was pretty much the just standard one that I got at Home Depot today. But the brand name is Rheem, R-H-E-E-M. And this is 178 liters, or approximately 40 gallons as well. Same as the old tank. So it's pretty much a direct replacement. And basically, in order to open this up, I'm going to need to cut a line, the dotted line on the bottom. And since I have enough ceiling height in this room, I will be able to take the box and lift it straight up off the tank, and it'll be sitting on the bottom part of the box. Nothing hard about this, just cut along the dotted line, in the case of this tank anyways. Just like that. And now I'll go ahead and we'll lift the box up. And there we are. Here's the new Rheem tank. Nothing in this bag. There's some foam padding that was around the drain spout, I guess. Again, there's the Tpr valve, but it's on the side in this one. And I'll just bring you guys over a little closer. We'll review some features on this, or at least where all the hookups are, and continue on from there. Alright, so here's the new tank. As I said, Tpr valves here on the side. Electrical panel is up on top in this one instead of going in through the side. And I believe we should be able to remove this little panel here to access the electronics. Our cold and hot are labeled with, I want to say indented, but the opposite of indented. All right, raised lettering. Here we go. Raised lettering. One saying hot, one saying cold, and the layout as far as left, right of the hot and cold is exactly the same as on the old tank as well. So. Should be no issues there. So pretty much we're just going to have to hook up a hot, cold, power, and go from there. Get it filled up and turn on the breaker. So should be a pretty straightforward install. One thing that I did when I first looked at this was down below. Can't really see it there on camera right now, but there is a drain plug. And I'll just tilt you guys down and show you the drain plug on this. Alright, so the drain on this one is a bit different. You don't need a flathead screwdriver to operate it. It's pretty much a large operating machine like that. Just a hand operable drain plug. And fully counterclockwise is open and fully clockwise is closed. So I just gave that an extra snug close, and that's all I did with that. As far as the Tpr valve, I'm going to bring you back up and just show you one thing that I did with that. Okay, so we're back at the Tpr valve again. One thing I did with that was this drainage hose was a little bit loose. It was only probably like 3/4 of the way threaded on. So I finished threading that on the whole way and just snugged it up. Okay. Doesn't need to be like crazy snug, but as long as it's watertight. One other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to operate the manual release, make sure that it operates. And the problem that I'm seeing right now is this one is showing signs of damage. It's actually bent. So good idea to double check apparently. Alright, I kept this good in the truck and laid it down carefully and everything like that, but it appears this Tpr valve is broken. Alright, so this is a top-down view right now, and as you can probably see, this is this little lever. It has a bend in it. The pin for the Tpr valve is actually sideways, and there's a gap on this side of the Tpr valve, but not on this one. The actual valve is coming out and it's like kicked to the side. So that is not what we need. This is the most important valve in the whole tank. This is what keeps your tank from becoming a rocket or a bomb. So this tank needs to go back. This is not a keeper. So I'll get this package back up, get to Home Depot, and hopefully catch them in time to get a new one. So yeah, I guess I'll catch you guys back here when I have a new tank. In the meantime, the old one is still draining, just so you know. But yeah, we cannot proceed with a Tpr valve like this. This is not acceptable. It's broken, defective, whatever happened to it, it's not good. So this is going back. Alright, so a truck ride to Home Depot later, and a bit of exchanging and all that good stuff. And I may or may not have kind of opened boxes there to make sure I was getting a good Tpr valve. Anyways, we're back to where we were before the big revelation of this bad valve in the other one. So, word to the wise, if the tank has been installed and then you find out about this problem, you have to deal with Rheem if you're getting a Rheem brand tank, and probably many other manufacturers. So when I went to the customer service desk, the guy pretty much had to make sure that it wasn't installed before I brought it back. So if I had have installed this before checking this valve, I'd be at a standstill, because I'd have to deal with Rheem, and I don't know where that would go, if they'd let me go in and exchange it, or if they'd want to ship me one. Anyways, test your valves, look it over good before you ever install it, is my best advice to you at this point, because I could have got hosed, pardon the pun. Alright, so anyways, we're back at it. New tank is here. As far as I can tell, the Tpr valve is working just right. Okay, there's no bends, no smacks. The valve is centered in the hole, and I tell you right now, I checked a couple of these at Home Depot, and there was a couple there where that valve was off on an angle. So something happened during shipping or at the manufacturing plant. So keep an eye out. Watch out what you're getting. Inspect it at the store if you got to. If you got to sneak to tear down a little bit of the box to inspect the valve before you ever take it home, do what you got to do. All right, this is this is important stuff here. All right, so with all that said, one thing I'm going to do now with this new tank is I'm going to find where the anode rod goes in, and I'm thinking it's one of these plugs in the back, which I'm going to pull out and inspect if I can. I may not, actually. I may have to look at the instructions on where the anode rod in this is, just so I'm not peeling something off that shouldn't be peeled off. But these look like plugs that should come out. Actually, no. They do not look like they should come out. There's foam underneath. So maybe you can't change the anode rod in these? I'm not sure. I haven't dealt with a Rheem hot water tank. I haven't dealt with many hot water tanks, to be honest with you. But as of right now, I am not seeing an anode rod on this tank. So I'll look at the instructions. I'll look at them now, just so this video is all encompassing, and make sure that there's no anode rod to add or exchange, because I had picked up an aluminum anode rod instead of I think it may be a magnesium one or something like that goes in it by default, but we are in what you consider the country, I guess, where we're on artesian well, and our water is hard, if you can tell by the water softener here. Okay, and the big pressure vessel here. So I'm on an artesian well, and they say that use aluminum anode rods when you're dealing with hard water in particular. So I'm going to look at the instructions, see what it says about anode rod, and get right back to you in a second. Alright, so after a quick review of the instructions, the model, which has a picture of an anode, is not a picture of the hot water tank that I have. So anyways, the two little removable pieces that are there, you lift them up, there's just insulation beneath them. So if I'm going to swap out anodes in this particular tank, I'm going to have to do further research on this model or cowl ream. But as for right now, I will not be swapping the anode for an aluminum one, I guess. I'll bring that back if it's not applicable. I know that there are some ream tanks now that are considered lifetime tanks. So maybe there's new technology where there's just not an anode incorporated. Anyways, not for me to be concerned about right now. We're going to continue on with the installation, and basically the installation is going to continue by continuing to remove the old one. So I'm going to move the new one off to the side, and we'll continue removal of the old tank. Alright, so at this point in time the tank is drained, and about that it took about 50 minutes, and then it turned to very dark rusty colored drainage. So I shut the valve. I didn't want any of that going down in my sump tank anymore, my sump pit. A little bit got it down there. I used some water and rinsed it down there. It's clear again. Anyways, I stopped at that point in time. Okay, that was enough. It was done. So about 50 minutes. So, you know, give yourself about an hour for draining the tank, depending on how it goes for you. Alright, so water's off, electricity is disconnected, tank is drained, easy to move. Next, copper pipe cutter. I got some nice stacks done by the plumber when this tank was originally installed. And what I'm going to be doing is separating these about midway through, and I'll be preserving everything you see here. Not to spoil it, but when the new tank goes in, hopefully these fittings down below fit that one as well. And I'm going to have those on that, and I'm going to use shark bite fittings to join the copper back together again. That's the plan. So here goes the fun part now of cutting the copper. Hopefully there's nothing inside these tubes right now. They should be drained down where I drain the tank, but let's find out. So I got my copper pipe cutter, which is adjustable, and I'm going to be putting that on over the pipe, and basically I'm going to be, there's the little deburring tool as well, setting it about midway, and I'm going to thumb tighten it till it grabs. I'm going to go a little bit tighter than that, and then I'm going to start to spin, and it will score the pipe. I'll make a full rotation or two, then I'll tighten again, make another rotation, tighten again, another full rotation, couple of rotations, tighten again, and I'm going to continue that until I'm through. There we are. Separation has been made. So I'm going to repeat that on this side. Like so. Start my rotation. And there we are. Okay, so we are officially separated. So at this point in time, I'm going to get a wrench, and I'm going to release these two pipes down below, and I'm going to reuse them on the new tank. But before I do that, while I'm thinking about it, I got my little deburring tool that's part of this. I'm just going to lift the pipe up, fit that in the pipe and just give it a little spin around to remove any burrs. Okay, like that. Same thing there. And same for these down below. You don't need to be too rough with it. Just gently lay it in there, just give it a little bit of friction. Like that. And to be nice and thorough, take a little bit of sandpaper. I got 150 grit here. And just clean these up a little bit. Same thing here. All right, and the ones below. There we are, cleaned up. So now I'm going to try and salvage my old hardware. I had a crescent wrench here, and I'll just adjust that to the right setting to get on these. And turn counterclockwise. And they come, no problem. Alright, a little bit dirty. Good bit of sediment inside there. You see that? I'll take them upstairs and clean them up a little bit. So that's the cold water inlet. So this shows now our water has been a bit tainted before. Let's see if the hot water is any different. Ooh. Nasty, nasty. Alright. So, most of the buildup is down on the end of the tank though. The rest of the pipe is okay, so I'm not worried about the rest of the plumbing, as you can see. But down on the actual tank connection, it's pretty nasty. So you can only imagine what the inside of the tank is looking like right now. Right, so it just goes to show, like, this thing was ready, very ready for replacement. Alright, so I've salvaged this hardware. This tank is fully disconnected and ready for removal. And I'll get these cleaned up in between takes here. And we'll get to hauling this tank out of here. Alright, so at this point I brought the hardware upstairs. I scraped out the corrosion and stuff that was on the inside. And I think it's still usable at this point, so we should be okay there. But the old tank is disconnected. It's empty, nice and light. Alright, this is ready to get out of here. So I have a couple of little helpers that are going to bring in a trolley for me now. And we're going to get that loaded on board, and it's going to magically disappear on out of here. There we are.
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm going to leave that right there. I'm going to wheel the tank on over to it. I'm going to leave it right there. Get this down. There we are. And we'll tip it on back. Tip, tip, tip. And say goodbye to the old tank. Off it goes. And there we are. We got a nice empty spot ready for a new tank. So let's get on to the install of our new hot water tank. Alright, so with the help of my little helpers, the tank is gone. We got a lot more work area now. And it's time to start the install of our new Rheem hot water tank. So, like I said, I got this hardware all cleaned up. We're ready to go with that. I'm going to go ahead and get those attached onto the new tank at this point in time. While I still got the tank out in the middle of the room, I got lots of manipulating room for my crescent wrench, all that good stuff, and we'll get these attached on. So I'll bring you in close, show you how I'm going to attach them, and you should be able to do this yourself as well. So let's get that part done. So to begin the process of getting our hardware put onto the new tank, first and foremost is our little handy dandy friend Teflon tape. Alright, so Teflon tape is going to be used as a thread sealer here, and it's pretty easy to use, you know, similar to any kind of tape per se, but it's almost very cottony in texture and properties. So I'm going to tear off, get a new end started. Now, when you're applying your Teflon tape, you want to go in the direction that you're going to be tightening, okay? If you went the opposite way, suppose you went counterclockwise with this, while you're tightening your hardware down onto the outlet or inlet, you're actually going to be loosening the Teflon tape. So if your hardware is going to be screwed onto this clockwise, you want to wrap your Teflon tape clockwise. That way, if anything, it's likely not going to be moving at all, but if anything, the threads will be tightening the tape instead of loosening it as you're putting the fitting on. So I'm going to cover all of the threads, and I'll probably do 3 to 4 layers of Teflon tape on the threads. This is quite thin, and it almost takes on the property of a paste when it's compressed down by the fittings. So you kind of keep a good bit of tension on it, cover all the threads. Like I say, about 3 to 4 wraps is plenty. So that one is good there. And I'll leave it just like that. So I'll repeat that process on the cold water side. Again, starting clockwise and just keeping tension on the tape the whole time around, hitting all the threads. Alright, I got 2 passes done on the threads now, so I'm going to go up for one more pass over all those threads and go back down through, and that is good for me. Alright, easy peasy. It's not too hard. You guys can do that. Alright, so at this point in time, we're ready to get our hardware put on. Alright, not very complex, just going to be clockwise threaded on. Okay, you may need to just go till you get it seated properly. Finger, always start it off with your fingers, okay? Don't use, no tools starting this off. Okay, same thing here. You'll feel it with your fingers when it's on properly. Get it down till it's hand tight. Okay, like that. And it's at that point in time you can get your crescent wrench out. Or a pipe wrench, whatever suits your fancy. And you're going to go until it's fairly snug. Shouldn't have to like over crank it. You're not going to try and dislodge the thing. But you should have a significant seal. Alright, let the Teflon tape do its work. You're not trying to destroy it. You're just trying to compress it nicely. So when you get a decent amount of resistance, you know you're done. Like that. Alright, those are on. Let's get the tank put into place. Alright, here's our hardware in place. Let's get the tank up onto the platform. So at this point where I'm moving it into place, I'm going to bring you in again and show you what I'm contemplating in this time frame and what you should also be looking out for. So now that the tank is in place, we can start sizing things up as far as our pipe fittings go. So our cold line, or our hot line, sorry, looks to be no problem. Our cold could possibly be a little bit different. It should line up. I could probably give this a little twist, a little move, and now we're more in a straight line right there. This one, same deal, we're in a good straight line. Alright, so that, as far as placement goes, is great, because you are not going to believe how easy this is going to be to make our connection now at this point in time. So what I have here to make this job super simple are shark bite fittings. Okay, these are 3/4 inch to 3/4 inch shark bite fittings. These are pretty much plug and play. Alright, you get these opened up, and inside here they have a little plastic mechanism here. That's more for PEX. That keeps PEX from collapsing. You can remove them with copper, or you can leave them in there. I'm going to leave them in. Okay, it'll just help a little bit more seal, but they can be removed. But anyways, it has a lot of little metal teeth on the inside, and that's going to push on to the copper pipe and create a watertight seal, and the little metal teeth are going to dig into the copper and hold it in place. And this is double-ended, so one end of copper is going to go in one, and one end of copper is going to go in the other, and our join is going to be complete. Alright, so I'm just double checking on the top of the tank. We have hot to the hot line, cold to the cold line. Now this copper here could be a little bit shorter to make it a little bit more convenient, but I would kind of like to keep it as is. The tank is a little bit higher than the old one, but I think our fittings should be alright. I think I will actually take a little bit off this one. I'll probably cut this off a little bit, deburr that and sand it, and just so that the pipe's not under strain, because I kind of really got to lift it up a good bit here, whereas if I leave it down around this area here, it's nice. So I'm going to do that. That's where the contemplation side of things come in. Alright, once you get everything lined up, you got to decide, you know, is this acceptable? The hot line is definitely acceptable. I'm not putting any big tension on the PEX to move that around. Whereas the cold, I kind of got to put a good bit of tension on that. So I can just take an extra little bit of copper off here, and we should have a nice connection. So I'll get my cutter and we'll get that done. Alright, so I'm just going to come in here Get this loosened off. I'll be taking about 2 inches off. Another right there. Alright, hold this out of the way. Start my scoring. Tighten it in. And there we are. So I took off about that much more. Again, I'm going to take out my deburring tool. Give that a little rounding. I'll get some sandpaper. Clean that up a little bit. Alright, like so. So now I'll check fitment, and that's a lot nicer than where I started. So it's at this point now that I can get my shark bite fitting, which is right here, and I'm ready to apply this. So I'm going to start with the bottom, line it up, give it a little twist as I push it on, and then I'm going to sink it home. Alright, a couple of clicks down, and fully seat that down. There was about 3 layers of pressure that I went through on the way down with that. And the top one, I'll line that up. Alright, all the way down. There we are. That's fully seated and joined. Okay, that's not going anywhere. So now I'll go over, get the hot line done as well, and our water joins are done. Alright, so let's get our next shark bite fitting. We'll get that opened up. Now the thing about shark bite fittings, or so I've seen and heard, is that over time, depending on water conditions, environmental conditions, and so forth, these can break down and start leaking. Now I don't know any more details than that. I just know that they are culprits for leaking after long periods of time. And as such, I've seen it suggested not to enclose these behind walls. Alright, so these are apparently not to be used behind walls. Alright, this is an open, plumbed area. This is easily viewable, leaks are easily seen, but apparently these are not what you want to be putting behind a wall. So that's just information I've come across. It seemed like a pretty reputable source to me, and that's why I felt the need to pass that on to you. So use at your own risk behind walls. Alright, so same process. I'm going to wiggle this on, give it a few twists down, start to get it seated, make sure everything's lined up in there. There we are. You can really feel the teeth kind of slide onto the pipe when you get it in a good position. And here we go. There it is. There we are. Our water connections are made. Right, how nice is that? Right, they're not coming apart. There is a tool that you can get for releasing shark bite fittings, but I do not have it. Alright, so that is our water connections made, just like that. Alright, so you might be asking now, you say, well, what if I don't have these copper risers? You know, what if someone just had a bit of PEX going straight into my tank and I and they soldered the connection on, or I got a totally different setup. Well, there's a solution for that. As long as you got 3/4 inch pipe, whether it's PEX or copper, usually that's the main ones you're going to be seeing. And I picked these up today. You have these. All right, these are also shark bite fitted, but they go straight onto your tank. All right, this goes straight on to your hot water tank, and then you shark bite that onto any pipe that you have, right? PEX, copper, whatever it may be. 3/4 inch. Okay, so you got one that has a valve. You can get two with valves if you want for your hot and cold. Typically they say no valve on the cold. I still don't really understand that. I like having a valve on my cold, but anyways, there it is. Okay, you can get those. Now as for me, these are going back to Home Depot. I'm getting a refund because I wanted to try this method out first, and that was success so far. At least I got to turn on the water yet, and we're going to find out how successful it was. But for now, all right, success. And I think those were the only things I picked up otherwise to do this job. This is kind of the go-to recommended Home Depot solution now. The DIY, just grab these, right? Screw one onto your tank. It even has a rubber washer in there and everything. You don't even need to Teflon tape that. I've heard that if you Teflon tape a rubber washered connection, it's actually worse than if you don't Teflon tape it, right? That's what the washer is for, is to do the seal. So if you put the Teflon tape in, you're probably not getting the proper seal. Again, it's kind of one of those things where my head is full of information that I don't know where it came from, but it's pretty reliable what sticks in there sometimes. So at some point somebody reputable said that do not Teflon tape connections when you have a washer. If this was metal on metal, you would use Teflon tape. But if it's metal to washer, you do not need Teflon tape. All right, that's what I heard anyways. I think it's reliable, and the source, if I recall correctly, was a reliable source. So, another little tidbit for you. All right, so our water connections are complete. Our tank is in position. The only thing left to do is our electrical connection. So we'll get to that next. But in the meantime, while we're doing that electrical connection, I can actually turn on the water and let this tank start filling. The only downside of that is where I'm recording a video, my water pump is probably going to kick in and out until this is full, and it might make a bit of noise. So I think I'll do the electrical first, and then we'll fill the tank. But do not, and it even says on the big sticker right here, do not turn on the breaker until the tank is totally full. Your heating elements will just burn out immediately. Just count it that they're going to burn out. Alright, and if they're damaged in that way, you are not covered. You got to buy another tank or more elements, whatever the case may be. Do not turn on the tank until it's full of water. So that's why, like, I wouldn't mind filling it right now without doing the electrical. It's only the background noise of it filling up that may interfere with the video. But I know not to turn on the tank until it's full. Other than that, I would say go ahead and fill it up now while you do the electrical. Make sure your fittings and everything are not leaking, stuff like that. So let's get the electrical done, and then I'll fill this baby up. Alright, so I got my electrician's pliers here, and I guess I'm going to need some morettes and a screwdriver. So I'll get those. Okay, so I got 2 morettes and a screwdriver. So our ground wire is going down, and it's actually attached to this metal cup, and then they give us a ground wire at the top. So that's going to have to come back out through somehow to attach to this ground wire, to this ground screw, sorry. So I may try to figure out how they want that to be done. I'm thinking that's what this little indent here is for the ground wire to come back out. So we'll go through the process of that. So I'll grab my BX wire, okay, with the little washer that we saved earlier. So I'm going to take that off now at this point. Get that all the way off. And I'm going to start this cap, and I'm going to pass the wires through that. Again, obviously the breaker's off, or else I'd be in a lot of trouble right now. Okay, so that goes to the little plate like such. Then I'm going to thread the washer over the wires and onto the back of this protector sleeve. Let's see if I can get you a view of that. Okay. And maybe I can get a grip on that with my pliers. I'll try and see. Not very easily. A little bit though. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'll try to give it another good crank here. Definitely a lot easier to get at this than, you know what might work with this? I think my crescent wrench might work on this. Because between the splines, oops, between the splines it looks like it may be flat enough. Ah, yes it does. There we are. Alright, so the little washer is on the back right here, which holds the protective sleeve on. That's all lined up nicely. So, big thing is I don't want to go trimming these wires if I don't have to, because another hot water heater might need these to be a bit longer. So instead of making up pigtails to extend them, if I can save the wires, I would like to do that. But I'm going to separate off my ground. They want that to come back out, so I'm going to keep that accessible that way. I got two hots, remember? So black to black. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to trim off the old curly end of this black. And I'm going to restrip a new piece. Just so we have a nice fresh connection. Okay, and then I'm going to give that a little twist. Like that. Grab a moret or a wire nut. Again, whatever you want to call it. And get that screwed in place. And that's going to go until it's good and tight. Like that. Okay, so that's black to black is done. Again, here's the white. I'm going to clip that off. Restrip. Match that up with the red. So get those matched up like that. And I'm going to give those a twist to get them started. Then I'm going to get a moret put on those. And if you want to get it a little bit extra tight, you can use your pliers. that those are good and tight. Alright, so that is those. We'll get those tucked down into this little pocket. Like that. Our ground is still here. There we are. Okay, we'll get that there. So we'll get the screws for that, which are right here. Get these lined up. One and a two. Alright, so that's in place there. So next, let's see, we're going to take our ground, get that bent, and wrap it around the green screw clockwise. And that can go back down into the pocket like that. Get that tightened down a bit. And then kind of straighten it out, because this last plate here, I'm going to push the ground down out of the way, and this last plate here should fit in just nicely so that your ground is up and visible, okay, but the plate is intact and in place. So let's get that lined up with the hole. And there you are. The electrical is connected. Again, do not turn on the tank. do not turn on the tank right now. Alrighty, so everything's connected. Alright, breaker's still off. I gotta just drill that in there. Do not turn this on yet. Shark bite fittings are done. Connections are made. Cold is going into cold. Hot is in the hot. I'm not going to open up my hot valve yet because all the taps and lines upstairs would drain down into the tank where it's currently empty. So I'm only going to open up the cold valve right now. And I can hear the water running. I can hear it filling up the tank. So far so good. Right, so at this point I'll reiterate, my hot valve is still off because the tank is empty. If I opened up the hot valve right now, all my taps and water lines above would drain back into the hot water tank. Right, so I'm filling up from the cold water supply until the tank is full. This is my pressure valve. Okay, I'm going to let the air out while it's filling until I get water coming out of my pressure relief valve. This is a quick way to purge your system of air without having to run a tap up above. Okay. I hear my water pump kicking on, so I've emptied my pressure vessel. Alright, I'm going to bring you guys back a little bit. I'll show you what I'm doing with the temperature pressure release valve. Just letting the air out as this fills, and when I get water out, then I know I can let go of it and let it seal off and finish filling. But for now I'm purging the air out of my hot water tank by using the TPR. Alright, have a look. To purge or test your TPR valve, you take the little metal toggle, you lift, that opens up the valve. So this is like testing it as well, right? Air, no air. Air, no air. Okay? And I can keep doing this until I get water. So then I know the tank is full at that point, right? Because the TPR valve is above the element. So when I get water out of this valve, I know this element is submerged. Then I can turn on the power. Alright, I'm going to keep on purging this as it fills. I'll take you guys back in a little bit and you'll see when I get water. Okay, got a little jug. Scoop that up and under the TPR drain. Still lots of air. Right, letting it fill. So far no leaks from the shark bite fittings. Still purging. And there's the water. So we've purged all the air out of our hot water tank. Okay, our tank is full. I can hear that it's no longer taking water by any big amount. It's quiet. A few more bubbles, a few more air bubbles that I can get out. But now I'm mainly getting water. Alright, and I'll just toss that down in my sump pit. There we are. So all I'm getting now is water out of the TPR valve. Okay, so at this point in time now, I will back you guys up again. I'll open up the hot water feed lines and turn on the power. Alright, so we're ready. I'm going to open up my hot water feed lines. Okay, thankfully, since we haven't drained any of the lines, nothing backfed, everything is still good. Okay, maybe a few little air bubbles making their way up the lines, a little bit that probably right at the top of the tank that the TPR valve couldn't purge, but otherwise it's full. There should no longer be a risk of burning up our elements by turning on the power. Electrical is done, plumbing is done. Drain plug is in tight. TPR valve drain pipe is on and tight. TPR valve is tested and working. Hot line is open. Cold line is open. Alright? So, another thing to remember is that if you have your cold line closed and your hot line closed, you've created a closed system. If you turn on your power in a closed system, it's going to build pressure from thermal expansion of the water. Hot water expands more than cold water. You're going to end up activating your TPR valve. You don't want to do that, all right? You need somewhere for that thermal expansion pressure to go. For me, it'll go back into my pressure tank. All right, this is going to work as an expansion tank as well as a pressure tank for my well. If you're connected to the city or town water supply, the pressure will go back against the municipal water supply. There's lots of videos on this if it applies to you. Figure out if you need an expansion tank, all that stuff. But basically I'm just saying that before you turn on your hot water tank, have your valves open. The pressure needs to go somewhere. Alright, so I'm trying to include as many warnings as I can because I want you not to go damaging anything. Alright, this is a DIY. You know, professionals have this stuff, you know, remembered and ingrained in them. we're doing this once every, what, 8 years? Once every 10 years? Unless we're helping out a friend. So, you know, having this video as a reminder of the do's and don'ts, just have it in your back pocket, might be a good idea. Alright, I'm trying to cover as many of the do's and don'ts as I can. If anything, I can watch it myself in 8 or 10 years time and remind myself, oh yeah, I learned that, and remind myself that way. Okay, so I want you guys to know this information. Alright, don't do this stuff. Alright, so you've seen me do the whole process. Valves are all open. At this point in time, I'm ready to turn on the power. And that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. Power's on. Circuit breaker never went off. I can hear it running. So far so good. Alright, so pending any kind of errors or disasters from here on out, my TPR valve's working. I know that if the tank falters, it's going to save me. Alright, it's not going to turn my water tank into a rocket ship or a bomb. Okay? This is legit. Never ever ever put a stopgap into your TPR valve. If it's leaking, there's something wrong. Don't put a plug in it. You will create a closed space and potentially blow up your house or yourselves. Okay, just never block it. Never ever ever put a plug in this just because it's annoying, because it's dripping or whatever. Do something about it. Get a new valve or get a new tank. Okay? I think that's about as many warnings and tips and everything as I can give you guys. I've done the whole job in front of you. This is probably a long video, but you know what? It's all inclusive, step by step. I did everything with you guys, and the job is done. Alright, I'm not a plumber, not a tradesman. Alright, this is just straight up DIY homeowner type of stuff. If I can do it, you can do it. Alright, just take your time, think it out, know the do's and don'ts, have the right tools, just think it through. Do it properly. So, that's it for this video. But until the next one, hope you're happy, hope you're healthy, take care of each other, and peace out.